Hey, what's up, zoners? Welcome to the earliest waiver wire show on the planet. Today, I'm going to be going over some players that I think that you should pick up and how much you should spend on them for your Week 14 fantasy roster. Hey, Week 15 is the fantasy football playoffs, so this is the most important waiver wire show of the season. I thought it was going to be thin, and then I saw injury, carted off. We have some people here that might win you some leagues. If that sounds interesting to you, hold on for 7 seconds. Hey, what's up, zoners? This is Tyler, Big Turd Ward, and Banjo, the dog, coming at you live from my garage. And this is the Fantasy Red Zone. Today's episode, I have all my notes typed out. I'll be sharing that with you right now. All right, let's start off with the running backs. I've got the stash of the year. I went over him like a million times. Keaton Mitchell, I spent $20 on this dude. He's still only like 35% owned. Am I playing the same fantasy football as everybody else? I do not understand this. 9 rushes for 64 yards, 2 receptions for 25 yards. Versus the Chargers last week. They are on bye this week. He led the backfield in rushing attempts and targets. He played 33 snaps. Gus Edwards played 19. Justice Hill played 20. So that's like 50% more snaps than anybody else. Baltimore offensive line generating 1.8 rushing yards before contact. That is best in the league. Mitchell gaining 14.2 yards per contact when given at least 1 yard before contact. That's best in the league as well. This is a bomb waiting to explode, people. 7th worst fantasy playoff schedule for running backs. That is not great. They do host the Rams next week, and they are giving up the 6th fewest fantasy points to running backs at 15.6. That's not great either. Low end, mid-grade running back 2, Keaton Mitchell, potentially running back 1 at some point during this year. Next up, Ezekiel Elliott. I'd spend $20 on this fool. 17 rushes for 52 yards today. 4 receptions, man. He's still getting a ton of receptions on 5 targets for 40 yards versus the Chargers today. Ramondre Stevenson is out with an ankle injury. He was not going to come back. Dude, he's probably going to be out 2 to 3 weeks, probably. I'm just guessing. This is some kind of ankle sprain. I have not heard anything about it just yet. But with Ramondre Stevenson out, look for Ezekiel Elliott to pick up the slack. He is averaging 3.8 yards per carry this season. Stevenson was only averaging 4.0 yards per carry. They've been kind of similar. 7 rushes of 10 plus yards on the season. So I looked at that and I saw that he is still kind of explosive. He's not all the way cooked just yet. He has the 3rd best fantasy football playoff schedule for running backs this season. That is amazing. They are at Pittsburgh next week. They are giving up the 15th most points to running backs at 19.4. And with Bailey Zappi or Matt Jones, they're going to run the ball a lot and they're going to be dumping off to the running backs a lot. Dude, Ezekiel Elliott, RB2 with Ramondre Stevenson out. Next up, Jason's preseason fantasy football MVP of the year. I almost texted him being like, dude, there is a chance. There is a chance. $15 I'd spend on this fool depending on Brian Robinson's injury. It is a hamstring. This is a year of the hamstring. People go out for like 2 to 3 plus weeks with hamstrings, depending on how bad it is. And hey, man, like I said, the fantasy football playoffs are right around the corner. This makes Antonio Gibson super valuable right now. 10 rushes for 35 yards. 4 receptions on 37 yards, and he did fumble again, dude, versus Miami today. Fumbling for Antonio Gibson happens all the time. That's why they take him out, man, and it happened again right when it needed not to. Brian Robinson out, hamstring injury. No game with more than 6 rushing attempts this season, and he got 10 today. I'm looking at Chris Rodriguez Jr. I am going to pick him up on the cheap. I almost made a separate thing for him. Hey, man, go check out. I think he's a rookie this season. Chris Rodriguez Jr., he's a banger. He's averaging like 4+ yards a carry. I would pick him up almost over Antonio Gibson, but I got to go with the top dude here. He does have the 6th worst fantasy playoff schedule for running backs. That is not good. And they are on bye next week. That's not good either. But again, man, we need to see how bad this hamstring is going to be because fantasy football playoffs is going to be the next game they come back off of a bye. I would not want to start Chris Rodriguez that first game, but I think Antonio Gibson, you might be able to start first round fantasy football playoffs. All right, man. Hey, Tyjae Spears. I've been holding on to him all season long. I was like, hey, dude, handcuff, waiting for Derrick Henry to miss some time. Derrick Henry, man, went into the blue tent today. I'd spend $10 on this fool. 16 rushes for 75 yards, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 13 yards today versus the Colts. And this was an overtime game. He outsnaps Derrick Henry anyways, like half of the games this season. Derrick Henry left with an injury. It looked like it was a concussion. He was all laughing going into the tent. Then he had to go back to the locker room. There is a good chance he misses next game. Tyjae Spears, worth $10, man. Probably going to be a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 without Derrick Henry there. He is a third-round rookie. Dude, just watch him. He looks amazing. Super slippery, and he's not thin. 10th best fantasy football schedule for running backs. That is very good. And they are at Miami next week. But Miami, dude, giving up the 9th fewest points to running backs at 16.0. Tyjae Spears, start him next week if, Derrick Henry is out. Next up, Deonta Foreman. I spent $5 on this dude. Left week 11 early after scoring a touchdown with an ankle injury. That was Khalil Herbert's first game back. We're like, oh man, look out for Khalil Herbert. He's an elite runner. Dude, Deonta Foreman came out right off the bat, scored a touchdown, got all the carries. He was out last week as well. He's on bye this week. He is leading the Bears in rushing yards this year, and he has 4 rushing touchdowns. The next person up on the Bears in rushing touchdowns is Secret Bagent man, Tyson Bagent, with 2 rushing touchdowns. So look at this, man. He's got double of a backup quarterback as far as he's competing with rushing touchdowns with. Come on, man. Fields is back and will remain the goal line back in this offense. So I like this offense when Fields is back. DJ Moore, he actually utilizes. So give me the goal line back in here. This guy is worth a flex most weeks, man. He has the 16th best fantasy playoff schedule for running backs. That is average. They do host Detroit next week, and they are giving up the 3rd fewest points to running backs at 14.4. I just watched, it was the Saints versus Detroit. You can run on Detroit if you are committed. And hey, man, the Bears, I think they will be committed to running the ball. Deonta Foreman, a flex when he comes back and plays again. Next up, this guy is important right now, dude. Go right now, pick him up just in case something happens. I don't know if you have time or space or whatever, dude. D'Ernest Johnson, I'd spend $1 on this dude. 7 rushes for 19 yards, 1 reception for 42 yards last week versus Houston. If you watch that game, you're like, dude, where is ETN? He got 10 rushes, and then it went all the way up to 7 rushes for D'Ernest Johnson. The snaps have been increasing every single week for D'Ernest Johnson, up to 39% last week. Hey, man, 50% is a 50-50 timeshare. He had 39% last week. ETN is banged up with his ribs. He is questionable for tomorrow night, okay? The 15th worst fantasy playoff schedule for running backs, that is average. They do host Cincinnati Monday night. They're giving up the 15th most points to running backs at 19.7. That is average as well. If ETN is not going to go, man, I think that this guy is a running back too. I was going to have to start him this week, but I ended up making a trade. I made a stupid trade, Puka, for Javonte Williams. Look how dumb I look now. All right, guys, the last running back on this list is a handcuff, Rico Dowdle. I'd spend $1 on this dude. 5 rushes for 15 yards, 1 reception for 7 yards versus Seattle on Thursday. He has been getting around 20 snaps per game since the bye. That is about a 28% snap share. 2 touchdowns in the last 4 games. Pollard has 3 in that stretch. He would be a high-end running back 2 if Pollard misses time. They have the 8th worst fantasy playoff schedule for running backs. That's not great. And they are hosting Philadelphia next week. That sucks. They give up 12.7 fantasy points per game to running backs. That is number 1 in the league. But if something happens to Pollard, Rico Dowdle is a high-end handcuff. All right, guys, on to the wide receivers. Curtis Samuel, $15. I'd spend on this fool. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 65 yards. He led the team in yards and targets today versus Miami. That was a fucked up game, man. I thought Sam Howell, he still ended up getting like 19 fantasy points, but it was ugly. He had 12 targets, which led the team last week, and 100 yards versus Dallas. And he was the only wide receiver to have a 100-yard game versus Dallas this season, man. So here he is leading the team in targets twice in a row. I want Sam Howell's top targeted wide receiver, man. This guy, young chicken-eating Brett Favre, man, just chucks the ball all over the goddamn place. He has a 75% catch rate. That is 6th amongst wide receivers. So he takes advantage of his opportunity. He does have the 3rd worst fantasy playoff schedule for wide receivers. That is not good. And he is on bye next week. But, dude, if you need wide receivers, this guy is a flex, especially in PPR, half PPR, man. This guy is a starting flex for you in 12-man leagues, maybe even 10-man leagues. Next up, Jalen Hyatt, $10 I spent on this fool. 5 receptions on 6 targets for 109 yards last week versus New England. He is on bye this week. Dude, he led the team with 24% target share and played on only 65% of the snaps. So, he didn't even play high-end snaps and still led that team with a target share. Dude, the fastest recorded speed in the preseason at 22 miles an hour. I talked about this in my Monday show. Dude, Mostert was like hit 23 miles an hour, I think in 2018. And now he's hitting like 21 and a half. That's like the fastest in the league right now. Tyreek Hill hit like almost, I think 22 or something like that. But Jalen Hyatt, man, top end speed in the league. 4+ targets in only 4 games this season. He is a third round rookie. And he has the second best fantasy playoff schedule for wide receivers. He's coming off of a bye, dude. Rookie wide receivers coming out of byes get, a lot more involved. Byes are amazing for rookies, especially a late season bye, with a huge game going into it, man. So I'm looking for a big game after this. It sucks that he's probably going to have Tommy DeVito or some shit. Who knows when Tyrod Taylor's coming back? I would trust this a lot more with Tyrod Taylor. They host Green Bay next week, and Green Bay is pretty good against wide receivers, giving up the 9th fewest points to them at 25.2. Next up, I'm going to tell you a guy with 0 fantasy points this week to pick up. Noah Brown. $5 I spent on this dude. 0 receptions on 2 targets today versus Denver. But I think he's still dealing with his knee injury, man. Right before that knee injury, he had back-to-back weeks with 150+ receiving yards. God damn it, that is insane. Dude, Tank Dell got carted off. Fractured tibia, man. Fractured goddamn tibia. So I am sorry, Tank Dell, man. Noah Brown is the veteran slot receiver here with a young rookie quarterback. That is amazing. I've seen that happen a lot of times. I can't remember. I used to have a lot of examples, but I do not. Bobby Trees ain't doing it. Noah Brown is the slot receiver on this team, and he just happened to not get any points this week. We're going to assume that he's going to be getting healthier and targeted a lot more. He does have the 13th worst fantasy playoff schedule for wide receivers, and they are at the Jets next week, and they are number 1 against wide receivers. That sucks at 19.5, but this is CJ Stroud we're talking about, man. Next up, Quentin Johnston. I spent $5 on this dude. 5 receptions on 7 targets today for 52 yards versus New England. Second on the team in targets. Only 3 games with 4+ targets coming into this game. So he has kind of had a really bad year for a first-round rookie. But Joshua Palmer is still out, and the coaches say he may return this season. That is not looking good, man. So he has the 6th worst fantasy playoff schedule for wide receivers. Keenan Allen is the number 1 here. And what does New England do? They try to take away your number 1 deal. So that is why, some targets went to Quentin Johnston. But still, I think that he is worth picking up, man. First-round talent. The do host Denver next week, and Denver is giving up the 6th fewest points to wide receivers at 23.7. Quentin Johnston is a pickup and hold. Wee-oo! We have a fantasy football emergency. Dude, Puka Nacua apparently broke his collarbone, is out for the season. Jason just texted me saying that, oh, you made the smartest trade of the year. I told him to F off. I thought he was messing with me. And apparently he said, no, Puka's out for the season. So Tutu Atwell will be on this list. Go check in the comments. I'd probably spend like fucking $15-$20. Tutu Atwell, man. Let's go. All right, next up, Michael Wilson. I spent $1 on this fool. He's been out for the 3rd consecutive game with a shoulder injury. Hollywood Brown, dude, left this game early with a heel injury. Dude, this is like the craziest shit, man. People are just dying left and right. This is like the All Quiet on the Western Front, some shit like that. 3rd-round rookie. Like I said, dude, him and Puka Nacua were the players that TJ Houshmandzadeh put his stamp on. He actually said that Michael Wilson was going to be the best wide receiver out of this class. He has the 3rd best fantasy playoff schedule for wide receivers, man. They are at Pittsburgh next week. They are giving up the 11th most points to wide receivers at 31.1. I do see Michael Wilson playing a big role when he comes back, but you probably only want to spend $1 because he's been injured for too long, man. I do not like that. All right, guys, on to the tight ends. Isaiah is still likely on your waiver wire, which is insane. $15 I'd spend on this fool. 4 receptions on 6 targets for 40 yards last week versus the Chargers. That was his first game in full action after Mark Andrews went out on IR. Mark Andrews might come back, but that's in the playoffs, okay? By this week, he had 2 top 3 fantasy football tight end finishes last season when I owned him. He can be a top 3 tight end for you. He has 10 worse. He has the 10th worst fantasy playoff schedule for tight ends. That is not great. And they do host the Rams next week. The Rams are giving up the 6th most points to tight ends at 11.1. Dude, double-digit points to tight ends. Isaiah Likely filling that hyper-targeted role, man. Go pick him up. Start him as your tight end next week. Next up, I have not said this guy's name in a long time. I'll just go with the last name because I know how to say Okonkwo. $1 I'd spend on this dude. Three receptions on 6 targets for 62 yards. today versus the Colts. The first game, he averaged more than 10 yards per catch was last week, and that is significant because, dude, last season, he was a deep threat. He averaged 14 yards per catch last season, and that's what we were kind of chasing this season. Well, today, dude, he had over 20 yards per catch, so he is trending towards catching deep targets. Maybe the philosophy is changing over there. I don't know. But look out for Okonkwo to start getting more yards, and he does have the fourth best fantasy playoff schedule for tight ends. That is great. He is at Miami next week, and they are average against tight ends, giving up 10.0 points per week. Double digits, baby. All right, next up, Brevin Jordan. I'd spend $1 on this fool. 3 receptions on 4 targets for 64 yards today versus Denver. He was second on the team in targets. Dalton Schultz was out with a hamstring, so who knows how long this hamstring is going to last. Third-year player, 5th-round draft pick. He's kind of been around for a little while. He has the worst fantasy playoff schedule for tight ends, and they are at the Jets next week. They are average against tight ends at 9.5. But Brevin Jordan, dude, they just lost Tank Dell. CJ Stroud, man, I would think that this guy is going to be a top 10 tight end play as long as Schultz is out. All right, guys, next up, Joe Flacco. I'd spend $1 on this dude. I do not know how he's doing right now. This is an early waiver wire show. I'll talk about that in a second. He was 4 for 5 for 65 yards and a touchdown as his first drive for the Browns, man. Watson is out for the year. 25% target rate to his running backs last time when he played a lot. And, dude, you see that Jerome Ford caught a touchdown. That is probably going to be, pretty common over there in Cleveland for the next couple of weeks. He has the 7th best fantasy playoff schedule for quarterbacks, so he might be a viable low-end quarterback 1 in the playoffs. They do host Jacksonville next week. They are giving up the 6th most points to quarterbacks at 19.4. All right, guys, last on this list is Gardner Minshew. I'd spend $1 on this guy, maybe. I meant to write down all his stats. I'm pretty sure he did not end the game well, but still, dude, Josh Downs back healthy. I know Josh Downs did shit. It was all Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman. Dude, he has got the 15th best fantasy playoff schedule for quarterbacks. He is at Cincinnati next week, 12th most points to quarterbacks at 17.9. Just looking at waivers, man, quarterbacks are thin. Everybody owns two quarterbacks. They're all injured. It is insane. Gardner Minshew at least has some high upside. His ceiling is higher than most. All right, everybody, that is the show. Thank you so much for watching. This is an early show. I am recording this at the halftime of the afternoon games. So if there are players that I miss, please comment down below. If you disagree with me about a player that's on here, change my mind, man. You can do it. Comment as well. I will add players from the Sunday night game, the Monday night game. Like I just said, Tutu Atwell, man, with the injury to Puka Nacua. That sucks. So please, we need your help, man. This is waivers are super important. This is a group effort. Hey, hopefully I earned a thumbs up. Hopefully I earned a subscription. If you are not already subscribed, please, we need your help, man, to take the show to another level. So we can spend more time on this kind of stuff. That would be amazing. And hey, man, this is Tyler, Big Turd Ward, Taz the dog, and we appreciate you.